curse of Santa Maria della Salvezza. The scent of incense couldn't mask the musty odour of decay that permeated Santa Maria della Salvezza. Lucia Moretti's footsteps echoed through the empty nave as she approached the sheet-covered painting propped against the altar. Father Bianchi wrung his hands nervously beside her. "We uncovered it during renovations," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It was hidden behind a false wall." Lucia nodded, her expert eyes already assessing the artwork's condition. As she reached for the sheet, a chill ran down her spine, and for a moment she could have sworn she heard a woman's laughter echoing from the church's shadowy recesses. Lucia shook off the unsettling feeling and grasped the edge of the sheet. With a swift motion, she unveiled the painting, and both she and Father Bianchi gasped audibly. The canvas, remarkably well preserved despite its age, depicted a nun standing in what appeared to be this very church. But it was the nun's face that caused Lucia's breath to catch in her throat. The woman's features were sharp, almost cruel, and her eyes. Lucia leaned in closer, her professional curiosity overriding her instinctive revulsion. The nun's eyes seemed to be painted with some peculiar pigment that absorbed light rather than reflected it, creating an unsettling void in the otherwise expertly rendered face. "Madonna Santa," Father Bianchi muttered, crossing himself. "I've never seen anything like it." Lucia straightened, her mind already cataloguing the techniques and materials she'd need to examine and restore the piece. "It's extraordinary," she admitted. "Late 16th century, I'd guess. The artist's skill is remarkable, but there's something unorthodox about the style." She turned to the priest. "You said it was hidden behind a false wall?" Father Bianchi nodded, his eyes never leaving the painting. "Yes, in the old confessional. We're renovating that section of the church, and when the workers removed some rotted wood panelling, they found a small chamber. This was inside, along with some other objects." Lucia's curiosity piqued. "Other objects? What kind?" The priest hesitated, then sighed. "Perhaps it's best if I show you." As Lucia followed Father Bianchi to his office, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The church, which had stood for centuries in this small Italian town of Salvezza, seemed to press in around her, its ancient stones whispering secrets she couldn't quite hear. In his cluttered office, Father Bianchi produced a small wooden box from a locked drawer. "These were found with the painting," he said, placing it on the desk between them. Lucia opened the box carefully. Inside, she found a collection of items that made her archaeologist's heart race. A tarnished silver crucifix, a small book bound in what appeared to be human skin, and a vial of dark liquid. "Have you opened the book?" Lucia asked, already reaching for it. Father Bianchi's hand shot out, stopping her. "I wouldn't," he said, his voice low. "The few words I read, they're not meant for God-fearing eyes." Lucia raised an eyebrow but didn't press the issue. Instead, she picked up the vial, holding it up to the light. The liquid inside was thick and dark, almost black. "Any idea what this is?" The priest shook his head. "I didn't dare open it. Lucia, there's something you should know about the history of this church." She settled into a chair, sensing a long story coming. "I'm listening." Father Bianchi sighed heavily. In the late 1500s, this area was struck by a terrible plague. The town was decimated, and the church became a makeshift hospital. The nuns who served here worked tirelessly to care for the sick, but... He trailed off, his eyes distant. "But," Lucia prompted, but as the death toll rose, some of the nuns began to lose faith. There were whispers of dark rituals, of attempts to bargain with other powers. He met Lucia's gaze. One nun, in particular, Sister Agnese, was said to have delved deep into forbidden knowledge, seeking any means to end the suffering. Lucia felt a chill run down her spine. And did she succeed? Father Bianchi's face darkened. The plague ended, yes, but the price. According to the church records, Sister Agnesi was found dead in the confessional, her body twisted in ways that defied explanation. The Mother Superior at the time ordered the confessional sealed and all of Sister Agnesi's belongings destroyed. "Except they weren't destroyed," Lucia said, gesturing to the items on the desk. "No," Father Bianchi agreed. "They were hidden. And now, centuries later, they've resurfaced." Lucia sat back, her mind racing. "Father, I'm an art restorer and historian, not an exorcist. What exactly do you want me to do here?" The priest leaned forward, his eyes intense. "I want you to uncover the truth, Lucia. Something dark happened in this church, and I fear that by exposing these items, we may have awakened it. We need to understand what Sister Agnese did, and make sure it can never happen again." Lucia wanted to laugh, to dismiss the priest's fears as superstition. But the memory of those dark, absorbing eyes in the painting kept her silent. Finally, she nodded. "I'll need full access to the church records and permission to perform a thorough examination of the painting and these artifacts." "Of course," Father Bianchi said, relief evident in his voice. "Whatever you need. But please, be careful. And Lucia—" He hesitated. "Perhaps it would be best if you didn't work alone, especially at night." She smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, Father. I'm a scientist. I don't believe in ghost stories." As Lucia left the office, neither she nor Father Bianchi noticed the subtle shift in the painting's eyes, following her movement across the room. That night, as Lucia settled into her room at the local inn, she spread out her notes on the small desk. The innkeeper, a friendly older woman named Maria, had been full of gossip about the church renovations and the creepy old painting that had been found. "They say it's cursed, you know," Maria had whispered conspiratorially as she handed Lucia the room key. Lucia had smiled politely, used to the superstitions that often surrounded her work. Now, looking over her initial observations, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of unease. The painting was undoubtedly unusual, its technique advanced for its time. But it was the eyes that troubled her most. She had never seen pigment behave that way, absorbing light so completely. As she jotted down ideas for tests she could run, a gust of wind rattled the window. Lucia looked up, startled, and for a split second she could have sworn she saw a face peering in at her, a face with dark, bottomless eyes. She blinked, and the illusion vanished. "Just tree branches swaying in the wind," she told herself firmly. But as she turned back to her notes, Lucia reached for her phone and sent a quick text to her colleague Marco back in Rome. "Interesting project in Salvezza. Could use a second pair of eyes. Free to join me for a few days." The response came quickly. "Intriguing. I'll be there tomorrow. Try not to solve all the mysteries before I arrive." Lucia smiled, feeling some of her unease dissipate. With Marco's help, she was sure they could unravel the secrets of the painting and put Father Bianchi's fears to rest. As she prepared for bed, Lucia resolutely pushed away thoughts of dark eyes and hidden curses. Tomorrow, in the light of day, she would begin her scientific examination, and all these ghost stories would be put to rest. But as she drifted off to sleep, Lucia's dreams were haunted by the image of a nun with a cruel smile and eyes that seemed to swallow her whole. Lucia woke with a start, her heart racing. The dream lingered at the edges of her consciousness, dark corridors, whispered Latin, and always those eyes, bottomless and hungry. She shook her head, trying to clear the cobwebs of sleep. The bedside clock read 3:33 a.m. A soft scratching sound drew her attention to the window. Lucia froze, listening intently. There it was again, a deliberate, almost rhythmic scratching. Slowly, she rose from the bed and approached the window, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for the curtain. With a swift motion, she pulled it aside. Nothing. Just the dark, empty street below and the branches of an old oak tree swaying gently in the breeze. Lucia let out a shaky laugh, chiding herself for her nervousness. She was about to turn away when something caught her eye, a series of marks on the outside of the glass, as if someone had dragged their nails across it. Lucia stumbled back, her mind racing. It was impossible. Her room was on the second floor, and there was no way anyone could have reached the window from outside. As she stared at the marks, they seemed to fade before her eyes, disappearing as if they had never been there. "I'm losing it," Lucia muttered, running a hand through her hair. "It's just stress and an overactive imagination." Unable to shake her unease, Lucia decided to get an early start on her work. She dressed quickly and slipped out of the inn, the pre-dawn air crisp and invigorating. The streets of Salvezza were deserted as she made her way to the church, the sound of her footsteps echoing off the ancient stone buildings. As Lucia approached Santa Maria della Salvezza, she noticed a figure huddled by the church door. Drawing closer, she recognized Maria, the innkeeper, her face pale and drawn in the weak light of the street lamps. "Maria? What are you doing here so early?" The older woman startled, her eyes wide with fear as she turned to Lucia. "Oh, Signorina Moretti, thank God you're here. It's Teresa, my granddaughter. She's inside and she won't come out." Lucia frowned, confused. Inside the church? But it's locked at night, isn't it? Maria nodded frantically. Yes, but she somehow got in. I woke up and found her bed empty. I've been searching for hours, and then I heard her voice coming from inside. But she won't answer me now, and I can't get the door open. Lucia's unease deepened. "Let me try. I have a key from Father Bianchi." She approached the heavy wooden door, inserting the key. It turned smoothly, but when she pushed, the door wouldn't budge. It was as if something was holding it shut from the inside. "Teresa!" Lucia called out, pounding on the door. "Teresa, can you hear me? It's Lucia, the art restorer. Please, open the door." For a moment there was silence. Then a child's voice drifted through the wood, sing-song and eerily calm. "The lady in the painting wants to play. She says I can't come out yet." Lucia and Maria exchanged alarmed looks. "Teresa, honey," Maria called, her voice shaking. "There's no lady in the painting. Please, just open the door." A giggle, high and unnatural, was the only response. Lucia felt a chill run down her spine. She threw her shoulder against the door, once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try, it suddenly gave way, sending Lucia stumbling into the dark interior of the church. The air inside was heavy and cold, carrying the metallic tang of old blood. Lucia fumbled for her phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing rows of empty pews leading up to the altar. And there, in front of the altar, stood Teresa. The little girl, no more than 8 years old, was facing the painting of the nun, her back to Lucia and Maria. She swayed slightly, as if dancing to music only she could hear. "Teresa?" Lucia called softly, taking a cautious step forward. "Are you all right?" Slowly, Teresa turned. In the harsh light of the phone's flashlight, Lucia could see dark stains on the girl's nightgown and hands. Blood, she realized with horror. Teresa's eyes were wide and unfocused, a beatific smile on her face. "The lady says you're special," Teresa said, her voice oddly adult. "She's been waiting for someone like you for a very long time." Before Lucia could respond, Teresa's eyes rolled back in her head, and she collapsed to the floor. Maria rushed past Lucia with a cry, gathering her granddaughter in her arms. Lucia stood frozen, her eyes drawn to the painting. For a moment, just a fraction of a second, she could have sworn the nun in the painting smiled. The next few hours passed in a blur. An ambulance took Teresa to the hospital in the nearby city, Maria accompanying her. The police came and went, full of questions that Lucia couldn't fully answer. Father Bianchi arrived, his face ashen as he surveyed the scene. "It's starting again," he murmured, almost to himself. "God help us all." As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the stained glass windows, Lucia found herself alone in the church once more. She approached the painting cautiously, studying it in the morning light. Nothing seemed different, and yet... Lucia leaned in closer, her nose almost touching the canvas. There, at the corner of the nun's mouth, was that a smear of red that hadn't been there before? The sound of footsteps made her jump. Lucia turned to see a man in his mid-30s striding up the aisle, a leather satchel slung over his shoulder. "Quite a welcome party out there," he said with a wry smile. "I hear I missed all the excitement. Hello, Lucia. Ready to solve a mystery?" Lucia felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Marco," she breathed, "you have no idea how glad I am to see you." As she filled her colleague in on the night's events, Lucia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The painting loomed behind them, a silent witness to the horrors that were only beginning to unfold in the small town of Salvezza. Marco listened intently as Lucia recounted the events of the early morning, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing minute. When she finished, he let out a long, low whistle. "Well, you certainly weren't exaggerating about needing a second pair of eyes," he said, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Have you had a chance to examine the painting closely yet?" Lucia shook her head. "Not as thoroughly as I'd like. Things have been... chaotic." Marco nodded, already pulling equipment from his satchel. "Then let's get to work. The sooner we understand what we're dealing with, the better." For the next few hours, Lucia and Marco meticulously examined the painting. They took high-resolution photographs, analysed pigments, and studied the canvas with ultraviolet light. As the day wore on, their initial excitement gave way to growing unease. "Lucia," Marco said, his voice tight with tension, "look at this." He pointed to a series of barely visible symbols hidden in the folds of the nun's habit. "These aren't just decorative. They're alchemical symbols, and if I'm not mistaken, some of them are associated with necromancy." Lucia leaned in, her heart racing. "But that's impossible. This painting is supposed to be from a Catholic church in the 16th century. There's no way they would have included pagan symbols." Marco's face was grim. "Unless the artist had a very different agenda than we initially thought." As they continued their examination, more anomalies came to light. The pigments used in the eyes defied analysis, seeming to shift and change under different lighting conditions. And most disturbing of all, they discovered a hidden Latin inscription along the bottom edge of the canvas, previously obscured by the frame. "Mortuis voco, vitam do, animas ligo." "I call the dead, I give life, I bind souls," Lucia translated, a chill running down her spine. Marco sat back, rubbing his eyes. "Lucia, I think we need to dig deeper into the history of this church and this Sister Agnese. Whatever happened here in the 16th century, it was far more sinister than a simple crisis of faith." Lucia nodded, already reaching for her phone. "I'll call Father Bianchi. He said there were church records from that time. Maybe they can shed some light on this." An hour later, They were seated in Father Bianchi's office, surrounded by stacks of ancient ledgers and journals. The priest hovered nervously, his eyes darting between the researchers and the door. "I'm not sure this is wise," he muttered. "Some secrets are best left buried." Lucia looked up from a crumbling journal. "Father, a child was injured in your church this morning. If there's any chance these records can help us understand what's happening and prevent it from occurring again, we have to try." Father Bianchi sighed heavily but nodded. "Very well. But please be careful. Words have power, especially in places as old as this." As they delved into the records, a disturbing picture began to emerge. Sister Agnese, it seemed, had indeed been a nun at Santa Maria della Salvezza during the plague years, but the official church history had sanitized her story considerably. "Listen to this," Marco said, reading from a journal entry dated 1587. "Sister Agnese claims to have found a way to save those afflicted by the pestilence, but her methods are an affront to God. The screams from the basement have not ceased for 3 days. We pray for the souls she has damned in her madness." Lucia felt her blood run cold. "There's a basement in the church?" Father Bianchi shook his head. "Not that I know of. The foundation is solid stone." "Maybe not any more," Lucia mused. "But in the 16th century, it's worth investigating." As they continued to read, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Sister Agnese had apparently been experimenting with a combination of alchemy and dark magic, seeking a way to cheat death itself. The plague had given her ample subjects for her twisted experiments. "Here's an entry from the Mother Superior," Lucia said, her voice hushed. "It says, 'We thought the worst was over when the plague passed. We were wrong. What Sister Agnese has unleashed is far more terrible. The walking dead fill the streets at night, and those they touch join their ranks. We have sealed her in the confessional with her cursed painting. May God have mercy on us all.'" Marco sat back, his face pale. So the painting wasn't just a portrait. It was part of the ritual. Lucia nodded slowly. A way to bind the souls she had raised, perhaps. But why hide it instead of destroying it? "Because they couldn't," Father Bianchi said softly. They turned to look at him, startled by his interjection. According to legend, anything truly cursed can't be destroyed by normal means. Trying to do so often makes things worse. A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant tolling of the church bells marking the hour. 6 o'clock. Evening was approaching. Lucia stood abruptly. "We need to find that basement. If Sister Agnese's laboratory still exists, it might give us the answers we need." Marco nodded, already gathering their notes. "Agreed, and we should hurry. If the legends about the walking dead are true—" "You can't be serious," Father Bianchi protested. "It's almost dark. It's not safe to go poking around in old ruins at night." Lucia fixed him with a determined stare. "Father, if what we've read is true, it's not safe anywhere in this town after dark. At least in the church, we have a chance of finding answers." The priest wrung his hands, clearly torn. Finally, he reached into his desk and pulled out a large, ornate key. "This opens the oldest part of the church near the altar. If there's a hidden entrance to a basement, it's most likely to be there." He pressed the key into Lucia's hand. "Please, be careful, and may God protect you both." As Lucia and Marco left the office, the sun was already sinking below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town square. The streets were eerily empty, windows shuttered tight against the encroaching darkness. They approached the church, its looming facade more ominous than ever in the fading light. As Lucia reached for the door, a sudden scream pierced the twilight, coming from somewhere in the town behind them. Marco grabbed her arm. "Lucia, wait. Are you sure about this? We could come back in the morning with more help." Lucia hesitated, her hand on the ancient wood of the door. Another scream rang out, closer this time, followed by the sound of breaking glass. "We don't have until morning," she said grimly, inserting the key into the lock. "Whatever Sister Agnesi started 4 centuries ago, it's finishing now. We have to end this." The door swung open with a groan, revealing the dark interior of the church. Lucia and Marco exchanged a look of grim determination, then stepped inside, the door closing behind them with a final echoing thud. The interior of the church was pitch black, the fading twilight unable to penetrate the thick stained glass windows. Lucia and Marco switched on their flashlights, the beams cutting through the darkness like knives. "Where do we start?" Marco whispered, his voice unnaturally loud in the silence. Lucia pointed towards the altar. "Father Bianchi said the oldest part of the church was near there. Let's check for any signs of a hidden entrance." They moved cautiously down the central aisle, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. As they approached the altar, Lucia's beam fell on the painting of Sister Agnese. She nearly dropped her flashlight in shock. "Marco," she hissed, "look at the painting." The nun's eyes, once staring straight ahead, were now turned to the side, looking directly at them. A cruel smile played on her lips, which definitely hadn't been there before. Marco swore under his breath. It's not possible. Paintings don't change on their own. Before Lucia could respond, a loud bang echoed through the church. They whirled around to see the main doors shuddering, as if something was trying to break them down from the outside. "Quick!" Lucia said, grabbing Marco's arm. "We need to find that basement entrance now." They split up, frantically searching the area around the altar for any sign of a hidden door or trapdoor. The pounding on the church doors grew louder, accompanied now by inhuman moans and screams. "Lucia!" Marco called out. "I think I found something." She rushed over to where he was kneeling beside the altar. He had pulled back a worn rug, revealing a circular stone set into the floor. Strange symbols were carved around its edge. "Help me lift it," Marco grunted, already straining to pull the stone up. Together, they managed to shift the heavy slab, revealing a dark hole beneath. A rush of fetid air escaped, carrying the scent of decay and something else, something chemical and deeply wrong. The main doors of the church exploded inward with a thunderous crash. Lucia's flashlight beam swept across the entrance, revealing a scene from a nightmare. A crowd of people was shambling into the church, but they were wrong. Their movements were jerky and uncoordinated, their flesh pallid and decaying. And their eyes were black voids, just like in the painting. "Go!" Lucia shouted, pushing Marco towards the hole. "I'll hold them off." Marco hesitated for a split second, then nodded and lowered himself into the darkness below. Lucia grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the altar and faced the oncoming horde. The first of the walking dead reached her, its hands grasping. Lucia swung the candlestick with all her might, connecting with a sickening crunch. The creature stumbled, but didn't fall. "Lucia, come on!" Marco's voice echoed from below. She backed towards the hole, swinging the candlestick to keep the creatures at bay. Just as grasping hands brushed her jacket, she leapt into the darkness. Lucia landed hard on a stone floor, the impact knocking the wind out of her. Marco helped her up, his flashlight revealing a narrow passageway stretching into the darkness. "We need to block the entrance," Lucia gasped, pointing up at the hole above them. Together, they pushed against the stone slab overhead. It was even heavier from this side, but with a final heave, they managed to slide it back into place. The sounds of the creatures above became muffled, but not silent. That won't hold them for long, Marco said grimly. We need to find what we came for and get out of here. They turned and began to make their way down the passageway. The air grew thicker and more oppressive as they descended, the walls slick with some kind of dark, oily substance. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened up into a large, circular chamber. Their flashlights revealed scenes of horror etched into the walls, twisted human figures writhing in agony, bizarre alchemical symbols, and everywhere the image of Sister Agnese, her dark eyes watching from every surface. In the centre of the room stood a stone altar, its surface stained dark with centuries-old bloodstains. Atop it lay a book bound in what looked horrifyingly like human skin. This must be Sister Agnese's grimoire, Lucia breathed, reaching for the book. As her fingers touched the cover, a jolt of energy surged through her body. Images flashed through her mind, plague victims screaming in agony, Sister Agnese chanting over writhing bodies, the dead rising from their graves with black, empty eyes. Lucia stumbled back, gasping. Marco caught her before she could fall. What happened? What did you see? He asked urgently. Before she could answer, a low rumble shook the chamber. Dust and small stones began to rain down from the ceiling. They're breaking through, Lucia realized with horror. We need to end this now. She grabbed the grimoire, ignoring the sickening sensation as the book seemed to pulse in her hands. Flipping it open, she began to scan the pages frantically. There has to be a way to reverse the curse, she muttered. Something to bind the souls and lay them to rest. The rumbling grew louder. Cracks began to appear in the ceiling, widening with each passing second. Lucia, Marco said, his voice tight with fear. Whatever you're going to do it fast. Her eyes fell on a page near the end of the book. The text was in a mix of Latin and some older, more arcane language, but she could make out enough to understand its purpose. I think I found it, she said. But it requires a sacrifice. Marco's face paled in the harsh light of the flashlights. What kind of sacrifice? Lucia met his eyes, her expression grim. Blood. The blood of someone willingly given to break the curse. Before Marco could protest, Lucia had already grabbed a jagged piece of stone from the floor. With a swift motion, she sliced her palm, letting the blood drip onto the open pages of the grimoire. Sanguinem offero, she began to chant, her voice growing stronger with each word. Animas libero, maledictum frango. The chamber began to shake violently. The ceiling split open, and shambling figures began to pour through the gap. But as they approached, they seemed to waver, like mirages in the desert. Lucia continued to chant, her voice rising to a shout as she poured every ounce of will into the words. The grimoire in her hands began to glow with an eerie light, growing hotter and hotter until she could barely hold it. With a final deafening crack, the chamber was engulfed in blinding white light. Lucia felt something tear free from deep within her, a pain so intense she thought she might die. And then, suddenly, there was silence. As the light faded, Lucia found herself on her knees, the grimoire reduced to ashes in her hands. The walking dead were gone, leaving only Marco, wide-eyed and shaken, standing beside her. "Is it over?" he whispered. Lucia looked up at the hole in the ceiling. Through it, she could see the first light of dawn breaking over Salvezza. "I think so," she said, her voice hoarse. "But at what cost?" As they made their way out of the chamber, both knew that the horrors they had witnessed would stay with them forever. The town of Salvezza had been saved, but the scars left by Sister Agnese's dark magic would take far longer to heal. And in the church above, unnoticed in the chaos, the painting of the evil nun crumbled to dust, its curse finally broken. As Lucia and Marco emerged from the hidden basement, the first rays of sunlight were streaming through the shattered doors of the church. The town of Salvezza was eerily quiet, as if holding its breath after the night of terror. Father Bianchi rushed towards them, his face a mix of relief and horror. "Grazie a Dio, you're alive! What happened? The town! There were monsters!" Lucia held up a hand, swaying slightly. "It's over, Father. The curse is broken." Marco steadied her as she stumbled. "She needs medical attention. The ritual. It took a lot out of her." As Father Bianchi helped them to a nearby pew, Lucia's vision began to blur. The events of the night replayed in her mind, but now they were interspersed with flashes of memories that weren't her own. Memories of a life lived centuries ago. I need to tell you something," Lucia said weakly, her eyes unfocused. "When I touched the grimoire, I saw things. Not just Sister Agnese's memories, but I think they were my own, from a past life." Marco and Father Bianchi exchanged worried glances. "Lucia, you're exhausted. Maybe we should get you to a hospital first," Marco suggested gently. But Lucia shook her head, her voice growing stronger. "No, you need to hear this. I think I know why the curse was able to be broken." She took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. In the 16th century, when Sister Agnese was conducting her experiments, she had an apprentice, a young novice named Lucia. Father Bianchi's eyes widened. "But that's impossible. There's no record of—" "No official record," Lucia interrupted. "But I saw it. I lived it. Lucia, the other Lucia, was fascinated by Sister Agnese's work at first. The idea of conquering death, of saving people from the plague, it seemed noble." She closed her eyes, lost in the memories. But as the experiments grew darker, as Sister Agnese delved deeper into forbidden magic, Lucia began to have doubts. She tried to stop her mentor, to destroy the grimoire, but she was too late. Marco leaned in, captivated despite his concern. "What happened?" Lucia's voice dropped to a whisper. "Sister Agnese used her in the final ritual. Lucia's blood, her life force, was the key component in binding the souls of the dead. With her dying breath, Lucia swore that she would return one day to undo what had been done." The church fell silent as the weight of Lucia's words sank in. Finally, Father Bianchi spoke, his voice trembling. "Are you saying that you are the reincarnation of this novice?" Lucia nodded slowly. "I think so. It's why I was drawn to this place, why I felt such a strong connection to the painting, and it's why my blood was able to break the curse. I was fulfilling a promise made centuries ago." Marco ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process this information. "But how can you be sure? These could just be hallucinations brought on by stress and exhaustion." "No," Lucia said firmly. "It's more than that. I know things about this church, about Sister Agnese, that aren't in any records, like the secret compartment behind the altar where she kept her most dangerous artifacts." Father Bianchi gasped. "But that's impossible. No one knows about that except—" "Except the senior clergy," Lucia finished for him. "I know. Sister Agnese made sure that her secrets would be passed down, just in case they were ever needed again." She stood up, swaying slightly but determined. "I can prove it. Help me move the altar." Despite their reservations, Marco and Father Bianchi followed Lucia's instructions. Sure enough, as they shifted the heavy stone altar, a small panel was revealed in the floor beneath it. Lucia pressed a series of hidden buttons, and with a soft click, the panel slid open. Inside was a small iron box, its surface covered in the same strange symbols they had seen in the basement. Lucia lifted it out with trembling hands. "This contains the last of Sister Agnese's artifacts," she explained. "Things too dangerous to destroy, but too powerful to leave unprotected." Father Bianchi crossed himself, staring at the box in awe and fear. "I've heard whispers about this, but I never thought... What do we do with it?" Lucia's expression hardened. "We destroy it, all of it. The curse may be broken, but as long as these items exist, there's a risk of history repeating itself." Marco nodded slowly. "I agree. But how? If these artifacts are as powerful as you say, it won't be easy to destroy them." A small smile played on Lucia's lips. "Fortunately, my past self left instructions for that too. We'll need to perform one last ritual, but this one will be to cleanse, not to curse." As the sun rose higher over Salvezza, the three of them began to prepare for the final act in a drama that had been unfolding for centuries. Lucia felt a sense of peace washing over her, knowing that she was close to fulfilling her ancient vow. But as they worked, a nagging doubt lingered in the back of her mind. The memories she had recovered were incomplete, fragmented. What else had been lost to time? And more importantly, what price would she have to pay to finally put Sister Agnese's dark legacy to rest? As if sensing her unease, Marco placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, Lucia, you're not alone in this. We'll face it together." Lucia nodded gratefully, drawing strength from his support and from the knowledge that, after centuries of waiting, she was finally ready to face her destiny. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the shattered stained glass windows as Lucia, Marco and Father Bianchi prepared for the final ritual. They had spent hours gathering the necessary components: blessed water from the church's font, candles made from pure beeswax, and herbs known for their purifying properties. Lucia stood before the altar, the iron box containing Sister Agnese's artifacts placed at its centre. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the grimoire to the page describing the cleansing ritual. "Are you sure about this?" Marco asked, concern evident in his voice. "We don't know what kind of backlash we might face." Lucia nodded, her jaw set with determination. "We have to end this once and for all. I won't let Sister Agnese's evil persist any longer." Father Bianchi approached, holding a silver chalice filled with blessed water. "The town is secure. I've instructed everyone to stay indoors until we give the all clear. Whatever happens, it will be contained within these walls." As Lucia began to recite the Latin incantation, the atmosphere in the church grew heavy. The candles flickered despite the lack of wind, and shadows seemed to deepen in the corners of the room. "In nomine Lucis et veritatis," Lucia chanted, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Purgo haec artifacta maledicta, libera animas captivas." As she spoke the final word, she sprinkled the blessed water over the iron box. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hiss like hot metal plunged into water, the box began to smoke. Lucia continued the chant, her voice rising to fill the church. The box started to glow, first a dull red, then brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at directly. Suddenly, a piercing scream cut through the air. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The candles extinguished themselves, plunging the church into darkness, broken only by the otherworldly glow of the box. "Hold the line!" Lucia shouted over the din. "Whatever happens, don't stop the ritual!" As if in response to her words, the air around them began to swirl. Ghostly figures materialized, the tortured souls of Sister Agnese's victims. They circled the altar, their faces contorted in agony and rage. Marco grabbed a candle, relighting it with shaking hands. "Lucia, look out!" She turned just in time to see a spectral form lunging at her. It was Sister Agnese herself, her face a mask of fury. Lucia felt icy fingers close around her throat, choking the words of the ritual. "You betrayed me once," Sister Agnes's voice hissed in her mind. "I won't let you do it again." Lucia struggled, trying to break free from the ghostly grip. Through the haze of panic, she saw Marco and Father Bianchi attempting to reach her, only to be held back by other spirits. "You're wrong," Lucia gasped out. "I'm setting things right." With a supreme effort, she broke free of Sister Agnes's grasp. In that moment of clarity, Lucia realized what she needed to do. The ritual in the book wasn't enough. She needed to improvise. "Marco," she called out, "the grimoire, destroy it." Marco looked at her in shock. "But we need it to finish the ritual." Lucia shook her head, dodging another attack from Sister Agnes's spirit. "Trust me, it's the source of her power." As Marco fought his way to the grimoire, Lucia continued her chant, mixing Latin with Italian and English, pouring every ounce of her will into the words. The iron box began to shake violently, cracks appearing on its surface. "No!" Sister Agnes's spirit shrieked. "Centuries of work! You'll destroy everything!" "That's the idea," Lucia growled, her eyes blazing with determination. Just as Sister Agnese lunged for her again, Marco reached the grimoire. With a cry of effort, he hurled it into the flames of the nearest candle. The ancient pages caught fire immediately, filling the air with acrid smoke. A howl of rage and despair erupted from Sister Agnes's spirit. The other ghosts began to waver, their forms becoming less distinct. Lucia seized the moment, raising her voice in one final incantation. "By the power of light and truth, by the sacrifice made centuries ago and renewed today, I break this curse, I free these souls, I end this cycle of pain and darkness." The iron box exploded in a burst of blinding light. Lucia felt a wave of energy slam into her, lifting her off her feet and throwing her across the church. She hit the far wall hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. For a moment, all was silent and still. Then, slowly, Lucia became aware of a soft, warm light filling the church. She opened her eyes to see the spirits of Sister Agnes's victims transforming. The agony and rage melted from their faces, replaced by expressions of peace and gratitude. One by one they faded away, finally free to move on. Sister Agnes's spirit remained, but she too was changed. The malevolence was gone from her eyes, replaced by a deep sorrow. She looked at Lucia, and for a moment, understanding passed between them. "I'm sorry," Sister Agnes's voice whispered in Lucia's mind. "I only wanted to help. I lost my way." Lucia nodded, tears in her eyes. "I know. It's over now. You can rest." With a final, gentle smile, Sister Agnes's spirit dissipated, leaving behind a sense of closure that Lucia felt deep in her soul. As the supernatural light faded, Lucia became aware of Marco and Father Bianchi rushing to her side. She tried to stand, but found her legs wouldn't support her. "Easy," Marco said, helping her to a sitting position. "That was intense. Are you all right?" Lucia nodded, wincing at the movement. "I think so. Just bruised. Did it work? Is it over?" Father Bianchi looked around the church in awe. "I believe it is. The oppressive feeling, the sense of wrong that has haunted this place for centuries. It's gone." As if to confirm his words, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds outside, illuminating the altar. Where the iron box had been, there was now only a small pile of ash. "We should check on the town," Lucia said, attempting to stand again. This time, with Marco's help, she managed it. As they made their way out of the church, they were met with a sight that brought tears to Lucia's eyes. The people of Salvezza were emerging from their homes, blinking in the sunlight like they were seeing it for the first time. There was a lightness in their movements, a joy in their faces that spoke of a great burden lifted. Maria, the innkeeper, rushed up to them. "It's a miracle!" she exclaimed. "Teresa, my granddaughter. She's awake, and she's herself again. Whatever dark cloud was over her has vanished." Similar stories reached them from all corners of the town. Those who had been affected by the curse were recovering, their minds clear and unburdened for the first time in days. As the initial excitement died down, Father Bianchi turned to Lucia. "What you did in there, it was incredible. But I have to ask, what happens now, with your memories, your connection to the past?" Lucia considered the question, realizing that she felt different. The memories of her past life, so vivid during the confrontation, were already starting to fade. I think that part of me can rest now too. The promise has been fulfilled. The curse is broken. Marco squeezed her hand. "So, does this mean you're retiring from the art restoration business? After all, how can anything compare to breaking a centuries-old curse?" Lucia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "Are you kidding? After this, I think I've earned a nice, boring restoration job. Maybe something simple, like a landscape. No portraits, though. I think I've had enough of mysterious eyes for a while." As the sun set over Salvezza, casting the town in a warm, golden light, Lucia felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The nightmare was over. The wounds of the past finally healed. Whatever challenges the future might hold, she knew she was ready to face them, not as a reincarnated soul with an ancient mission, but as herself, Lucia Moretti, with a new appreciation for the complex interweaving of past and present and the power of redemption.